for listening.
Hey folks, this is Victor with the On Point with Victor show. Make sure you listen every Tuesday 1 to 2, only right here on America's Web Radio, the On Point with Victor show. Remember folks, I'm not angry, I'm just right. And
good morning and welcome to America's Web Radio. And this is David's pick, as a matter of fact. And we always start our show. We've got a great guest, a return guest, as a matter of fact. Keith Bogle was in the U.S. Air Force, and as many of you know, we've started something a little bit different. I don't know of any other station in the country that's doing this, as a matter of fact, but I lost a very good friend, a veteran and brother that died from the effects of Agent Orange, and so we set up a page on our website called the J. Roy Ritchie Memorial Prayer Line, and I know during J. Roy's fight to live, he had a number of his brothers that were praying for him, and it gave me the idea, why not do it on a larger scale? And we've got folks that are going to our website, filling in the form and asking for prayers for their friends, and when I say friends, they're veteran friends, and it may be a family member that's a veteran that's needing help and needing prayer. And if you'll send us their name, we will make sure that it's listed. I've got the ones that we've already done, and we hope that a number of people have in turn prayed for them. And and as usual, I've got my paperwork messed up and backwards. So anyway, folks, you know about it. Send it in. If it's you or someone that you know that needs prayer. So with that being said, we're going to take just a moment before we get started, about 1 minute, and we'll come back after a moment to think about our veterans and what this season is all about and how important, and we'll talk to Keith about this a little bit too on his experience during the holiday season. And we'll be back in just about 1 minute. Thank you. Amen.
Put your weapon next to mine.
Hey, right on down the road.
Hey, right on down the line.
Come on over.
Come on over.
War's not over.
As everybody knows, that's the way we start this, is with Jody, and we always have fun with Jodies and enjoy them. And Keith, I don't know if a Jody ever helped you get through on a forced march or anything like that, but I know when I was in AIT that whenever a platoon leader or first sergeant or our platoon sergeant would start up a Jody to help you go that last half mile or whatever it happened to be. And they're always, I love the Jodies, and that's one of the reasons we start the show with it. So welcome back to America's Web Radio.
Thank you, Dave, for having me, and Merry Christmas to you and all of your listeners.
Thank you, sir, and to you as well. And we do wish everybody a very Merry Christmas. And as I told Keith earlier, because of my situation, I'm going to take off tomorrow and do something a little bit different. I have, because of our show called Kung Fu Master, and we have Daru, who is our Kung Fu Master, and we do an hour of meditation on Friday. Well, we're not going to be working tomorrow, but I decided this was what I wanted to do basically tomorrow, was take off the entire day and meditate and think about how fortunate I am to have been brought up in the United States, what a great country it is, and what a great military we have, and how important it is to keep that military strong and do whatever is necessary to keep it strong and keep us the strongest nation in the world. So anybody's welcome to go to our Kung Fu Master Deru show and listen to, and he will guide you through it if you want, or just take the time out to do it on your own. Whatever your plans are, we hope that you have a great day tomorrow and keep in the right perspective of what it's all about. So, with that being said, I want to mention the fact, and Keith is going to expand on it a little bit, that we do this show partly because of the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame. And I've always got to salute Rick White and Colonel Rick White, retired, that helps get our guest on. And Rick has become a good friend and just a super fantastic guy. By the way, at the same time, I want to mention that yesterday, Pete Mecca, Lieutenant Colonel Mecca, retired, did his show called A Veteran's Story, and it's posted on our website, and you've got to go to it. I've never said I didn't know that so many times in my life, I think, but his whole show, and he didn't get through it, so we're going to do another show, or he is, regarding stars, Hollywood stars that have been in battle and served their country. Everybody knows Jimmy Stewart and Johnny Carson and his sidekick Ed McMahon and so on and so forth. But I mean, and not just men, women as well, that Pete recognized that were in the military and served their country. And as Keith mentioned, it'd be hard-pressed to find one today in Hollywood that would serve our country. But, I say that, and I agree with you, but I bet if push came to panic, some of them would step up to the plate.
Yeah, I did say had served rather than would serve, but anyway.
Yeah, but, it's from my standpoint, and I'm sure from... And I always make it a clear point that I did not go in country. I've been proclaimed a Vietnam era veteran, and I did not go in country, but I did serve my country, and I appreciate the respect that folks have that served. And by the way, I want to mention too that Rocky Blyer is going to be on, and I don't know, soon. That's the best I can say. But he's doing a spot for us, and if you all don't know his story, it's incredible. And after he was injured by a grenade, he returned and made it back and played football for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Missing part of a foot.
Pardon me?
He was missing part of a foot from that grenade attack.
Oh, was he?
Yeah,
oh, okay.
And that's what was amazing with the quality of a running back, and harder of a runner he was, that it wasn't just he recovered from his wound, but he was, I want to say, obviously it wasn't a handicap, but he was physically impaired as a result of it, and that doubled the difficulty he had in getting back. So it was quite a story.
Well, he's going to be joining us, like I said, in the very near future. And when I say join us, come in for an interview and chat with us. And want to remind everybody, put down on your calendar January 28th as Warriors for Hope. That's Warriors to Citizens and the St. Jude Foundation have gone together, and they're putting on a fantastic event. It'll be a Zoom type event or whatever where you can watch it, and it'll be hosted by Lee Greenwood, and I think obviously Rocky will be there as well. And they've got some fantastic things that you can bid on, that guitars that are signed by different stars, and just a lot of different things that you'll find very, very interesting. And speaking of stars, like I said, go to our website and go to A Veteran's Story. Pete Mecca did just such a wonderful job yesterday going through the Hollywood stars that have been on active duty, served either pilots or even to some grunts. James Arness, Matt Dillon, and he wanted to be a fighter pilot, but he was too damn big. At 6'7", he couldn't fit in the plane, so that he didn't do. But it's a very, very interesting show, and we have so many ways that you can be a part of the station if you want to be. We have a patrons program that you can, we've got pocket-size constitutions that if you sign up, and our 3x5 American flags that we'll send you, and there's just all sorts of options, and we would really appreciate you going to our site. So we've gotten the sort of the business stuff over with, and we're glad to have Keith back in the studio with us. And Keith, I was talking to some other vets that, you know, this is a season and probably the hardest time of any service person's life is the holiday, and particularly Christmas. And yet, and when I say and yet, I want to ask your experience, but you know, you do have the military family with you. It's just not your wife or kids or whatever your circumstance happens to be. But I do admire our country, and as I've said before, I can't address other countries and what they do on their holidays or whatever, but I can address the fact that our country, if you're in the military and you're serving particularly out of the United States, you're at some foreign base or something, they still try their darndest to serve a meal or two meals that will be as close to sort of like home as possible. Turkey obviously on Thanksgiving, and turkey again on Christmas, and they generally do quite a feast. And you know, I think in many cases our back when I was in, it was our cooks that were military folks. Now I think a lot of it's contract labor and not our military, not our KP and all that, but still we go out of our way to try to make it as good a day as possible. Would you say you found that to be true?
Indeed, and I know that. Well, I didn't serve overseas, and I can only imagine what it would be like to compound the sense of loneliness of being away from home for the holidays, is to add in being in a foreign country and possibly a war zone or whatever. That would have more impactful. But whenever my first year in the service, I was at the language school in Monterey, California. And the school shut down for between Christmas and New Year's. And my buddy and I, we were a little bit older than the other guys we were stationed with out there. And so we had gotten an apartment off base. And what we did is for Thanksgiving and Christmas is the guys we were stationed with that were in the guys and girls that we were stationed with that still were in the barracks, if they weren't able to go home for the holidays, we invited them over to our apartment. Now, I was studying. It's pretty interesting when you got a bunch of linguists together, because everybody messing with each other in whatever language you're studying. I was studying Arabic. My roommate was studying Bulgarian. His girlfriend was studying Chinese, and my girlfriend was studying Thai. So we'd have them over. So the four of us all got together and put together a dinner, and we'd invite everybody off the base that wasn't going home over to our place for a holiday meal and stuff, and it was lots of fun. I think it was Thanksgiving that year that we had it was one of the first of many earthquakes that I've been through in California, and we had some adult beverages during our meal, and some people had left to go get some more, and I had the apartment we lived in. It was the first floor was on stilts, and that's where you parked your cars, and then there was the next level was apartments, and then we were in the top apartments above it. The couple below us were a rather hefty couple, and so when the apartment started shaking, we just thought they were getting a little amorous for the holiday. And then a little later on in the afternoon, the news came on, and it had the banner across it, earthquake, and we were all upset that we had missed our first earthquake because we had been drinking. But anyway, it was pretty funny. But no, at this time, especially like my former neighbor, his son is in the Air Force Station in Dubai right now. Rick's son is commander of the, let me hope I get this right, the 75th Ranger Battalion at Benning, and they've just recently deployed back to Afghanistan. And so I think of all those troops and the other troops we have around the world that are away from their families this year, and hope that everybody keeps them in their prayers.
By the way, I don't know why I'd skip this, but I did my basic at Ord, which is right next door to where you did your...
Yeah, we were at the Presidio,
Yeah,
and it was attached to Ord, and of course then there was a happy meeting ground between them was the Naval Postgraduate School that we used to go over there on the weekends because you get pictures of mixed drinks for 75 cents. So that was always fun.
Yeah, it's in fact when I did my basic and AIT at Ord, and I enjoyed it. Ord was a beautiful base and fort, and I couldn't have been luckier. And the only thing I didn't like was where they'd turn the roads into dust, and we did our forced marches, and I hated to hear the term double time.
Yeah, I can imagine what that would have been like. Well, I know it was the language school was pretty tough. Arabic was 47 weeks, and it was basically 4 years of college in a year.
Wow.
And it was pretty intense. You'd have 3 hours of classes in the morning, 2 hours in the middle of the day break for chow and for military stuff, and then 3 hours of class in the afternoon. But it was pretty intense. And so the location in Monterey was excellent. Like if you were in the bar at the NCO club, behind the bar was the glass windows overlooking the Monterey Bay and Fisherman's Wharf. And when we wanted to take a break from school, we just get in the vehicle and drive down PCH down toward Big Sur and Carmel in that way, and that can unwind pretty good. That was
wow. I love Carmel too. Talking about beautiful. We're going to take a break right quick. We'll be back with Keith right after this.
I'm your host, Dr. Hal. Every week we come to you with the information that you need so that you will be prepared to advocate for your family and for yourselves when it comes to your health care. God forbid we get Ossoff and Warnock in the Senate and the left gets what they want, which is a majority in Congress and the White House. First of all, health care will be more expensive. There initially will be a public option. The government will run it. They will be initially very inexpensive, and it will drive commercial payers out of the healthcare market. Then the choices will disappear. The only insurer out there will be the federal government, and that's when we get a single payer.
Part of this virtual fundraiser for St. Jude Children's Research. This is Rocky Blyer, and I hope you'll make plans to join us on January 28th for Warriors for Hope. I'm thrilled to be a part of this virtual fundraiser for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital and Warrior to Citizen. These organizations do so much to support veterans, first responders, and families who've been touched by pediatric cancer. I'd also like to thank David Moxley and his show, David's Pick, here on America's Web Radio, for supporting Warriors for Hope. And I know you'll want to join in and support this event as well on January 28th. So visit warriorsforhope.events. That's Warriors and the number 4, Hope.events. You can make a gift and reserve your seat for this virtual benefit. Again, that's Warriors and the number 4, Hope.events. Thanks for your support, and I'll see you at noon on January 28th.
And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Rocky. Everything I hear about him, it's compliment on top of compliment. What a great gentleman he is, a great brother from his service in the military, his wound, and as Keith was saying, his comeback was just absolutely incredible. And I think after he came back, they won 4 Super Bowls, I believe. And he was obviously a big part of it. And I can't wait to meet him. He's going to be in doing a show with Joe DeLapp and some other gentlemen that are involved with the Warriors to Citizens group and the event with St. Jude's Hospital. So, enough of that, and back to Keith. Keith, what's the most memorable meal you had when you were in the service? And were you in during, well, I guess you were during a couple of Christmases, or 3 or 4?
The most memorable one wasn't a military meal. When I was at the language school, several of us volunteered to work the Bing Crosby Pro-Am golf tournament over in Pebble Beach. And we got to go to that. And as a kid from Southwest Virginia, it was quite something to be at a sit-down dinner with, I don't know, there were several hundred people there. And lobster and steak and everything. It just totally amazed me. It was a lot of fun. And of course, it was one of the many times that we ran into Clint Eastwood out there, and it was really funny. But getting back, just one more thing about Rocky. We had I had the honor, in addition to being vice president of the Johns Creek Veterans Association, I'm also captain of the color guard. And our color guard presented the colors at a fundraising event for Warriors to Citizens, at which Rocky was the keynote speaker. Now, Rocky also sits on the board of Warriors to Citizens. And so then afterwards, we had an opportunity to speak with him and have our picture taken with him. And he's an incredibly dynamic speaker, very forceful, and he's a very personable guy, too. I mean, it was just like a guy sitting around the table or whatever, chatting with him after.
Sort of like our studio.
Yeah, sort of. And so it was quite an honor to get to meet him and to listen to his story. Then followed that up with the special they had on ESPN about when he went back to Vietnam to visit the actual battlefield that he was wounded in, and it was extremely hot, and it was very impactful on him, and to be there and witness it, it was, you sort of felt like you were prying into such a personal thing for him, but it was very, very impactful, especially when I never went to Vietnam, but I read hundreds of books on it and on people's experiences, and I have a lot of friends that were there. And if you haven't never been in a situation like that, there's a part of you always wonder just how would I have handled myself? What would I have done? Would I've been a coward? Not whether I've been a hero or not, just whether I would have just been able to perform, and be there with my fellow comrades and stuff. And so anyway, it was I've read a lot to try to get an idea of what it was like, and that was something after the fact that had nothing to do with the war. It's just 50 years later, the impact that the war still had on him, and how something you carry with you all your life.
Well, this is something that we've talked about, and I get blamed many times on this show for talking too much, but we've talked about it before, and it's like we came out of World War II, and it was sort of glamorized by the movies, different movies, and then we went into a quasi-nasty war in Korea. And then we went to Vietnam. That was the nastiest of nasty wars that we had ever been in my opinion. And if with your reading, if I'm saying something wrong, please tell me. But I guess Vietnam, World War II, you shot them or they shot you, and that was sort of it, for the most part, in simplistic terms. But in Vietnam, they proved how inhumane humans can be to other humans. And some of the, we call it PTSD today. Many times it was called shell-shocked or whatever, but different terms. But now it's called PTSD. And I had friends and one of them, J. Roy Ritchie, that was there. He and I sat around our house. We roomed together, and we sat around our house many, many nights, maybe having one too many beers, but we were talking about his experiences in Vietnam, and he said, he couldn't believe what he was ordered to do at times, and it was, well, look at what they did to us, we got to go do it to them, or vice versa. And I get off on this, and I say it too many times, that our Congress people, I don't think they should be in Congress if they haven't served in the military. But they have no idea what they're talking about when you bring back and talk to a Vietnam veteran, or some of the atrocities that have happened now in the Middle East. And I pray, literally daily, that our Congress people will take care of the the smoke that the military has inhaled in Iraq and in Iran and so forth and so on, and Afghanistan, the burn pits, and it's killing people, and it's killing our veterans.
That'll be this generation's Agent Orange fight that'll go on for decades before it's rectified, and it'll never be rectified.
But no, it'll never be rectified, but I just hope it's identified, and the veterans that suffer from it get their just rewards, And
well, the hardest thing about that is that they won't know for decades the full impact of it. It's just like Agent Orange. When I first started hearing about Agent Orange, it seemed like the effects of it were noticed fairly quickly, like say 10, 15 years, whatever. But I mean, we've got veterans in our group that are in their 60s and 70s, 40, 50 years after they left the country, that are dealing now with the things that can be traced back to Agent Orange.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it was only recently that, what was it? Well, my Navy guys will get on me for this one, but
the
blue water Navy, where they finally got that. I mean, just because you weren't in country, if you were on a battleship off or on an aircraft carrier off of the coast or in Thailand, and you're loading that stuff on the planes, or in Guam, you were exposed to it as well. So.
Or if you were anchored offshore and they sprayed over you, that's and I've got to bring up a salute to the Coast Guard. People don't realize how much the Coast Guard played a role in Vietnam. Certainly the Navy did, our carriers, our battleships, so forth and so on. But the Guard on the coasts of Vietnam were our Coast Guard, and they too got sprayed with Agent Orange. And I always want to recognize, again, we have the greatest military in the world. I don't think we're second to anybody, in my opinion. And the interchanging of working between branches is just, to me, incredible. And you're talking a 500,000 men that might be serving in an area at one time, and the coordination is just beyond belief. So anyway,
one other thing I wanted to mention before I forget,
sure.
With us talking about the different wars, starting this morning on the History Channel, they're showing the 10-part miniseries Band of Brothers, which is one of the
all-time
best,
great,
if not the best, document or miniseries ever shown on TV. And Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg did a bang-up job on. And I think about it every time I go north on 85 and I pass the exit to Toccoa, where Curly, the mountain that challenged him in their basic. And I'm somewhat of my uncle was a history professor, so I won't call myself a historian, but I'm quite enamored with military history and our country's history. And I just got back from a trip to Virginia where, unfortunately, we buried my uncle, who was an Air Force veteran. Probably one of the motivating or influential decisions on my joining the Air Force when I just sort of decided to join the military. But it always intrigues me when I take that trip, because I go up 85 and I pass the exit for Toccoa, which is where the airborne unit did their basic training, that depicted in Band of Brothers. And then you go through Cowles Pen, South Carolina, which is that last big war scene in The Patriot with Mel Gibson. And it was a deciding victory in the Revolutionary War. Then you go by Kings Mountain on the North Carolina Georgia or South Carolina border, and that was the site of major battles in both the Revolutionary War and the Civil War. And then up closer to home, there's off of Interstate 77, right on the New River there's the Shot Tower. And this is where they made ammunition during the Revolutionary War and the Civil War. And they'd have different sized towers, and they'd take the molten lead. Somebody will correct me if I get this wrong, but they would take the molten lead, and depending on the caliber that they were making, is how the distance that they dropped it in, and then I guess it landed into cooling pits or whatever. So it's anyway, it just reminds me of all the stuff that our country has gone through, and to get where we're at and what we're trying to do with it now.
Well, I won't even go into that. I'm not sure what we're trying to do with it now,
No.
Nor do I think anybody has a real answer to that. But, the one thing that I hear from not all vets, but most all of the vets I've interviewed, is that we will get through it. And we have one powerful thing that many other countries don't have, and that's our faith and our hope. And we have overcome all types of adversity over the years, and we will get through all of this at some point. But I think I asked before when you were here, do you keep track of many of your friends that you made while you were in?
A couple, but not a couple of them, but both of them. Well, I had kept track with two of my closest friends, but both of them unfortunately have passed. Both of them have unfortunately passed away.
Yeah, bring it a little closer to you.
So both of them have unfortunately passed away. So not too much.
Well, but if I were a betting person, I bet those two and probably some others that are in the back of your mind or could be in the back of your mind that, yeah, they're friends that, they're the greatest friends ever when you...
They definitely were. The one that lost the most recently, I'm still in touch with his family, and I mean they're all grown adults with families of their own, and I knew them back when they were changing diapers and babysitting for them and stuff. So it was very close. But again, my relationships in the military weren't quite the same as the guys who'd seen combat either. Because I think you develop a closer relationship to those. But even those, I hear that a lot of times the guys don't. You're very close during it, but you don't always get back together because you don't want to relive it all or whatever. I don't know, but it's different for everybody.
Well, it is, and I've said it thousands of times now. The world's largest fraternity and sorority is the U.S. military, and it really, as I mentioned earlier, it sort of crosses over as well between. It doesn't matter what branch someone was in. If you you can almost, I don't know if it's smelling them or just telling them, but you can tell that somebody has been in the military. And, if they happen to be wearing a cap and say, I served on so-and-so destroyer or this or that, just, and they do appreciate. Thank you for your service. And if you happen to be in a situation where you can buy them a meal or buy them a cup of coffee or a drink or whatever, and this goes for our first responders too. I don't ever want to leave them out because, I've come to the point with the show that when I say first responder, everybody instantly thinks of police department, fire department, EMTs or whatever, but I look at it a bit broader than that, in that the United States is the first responder. We are the first on the scene of any national or international disaster, and we always have been, and we're the most generous country in the world. And anybody that calls for help, we respond and we answer. And I think this has been shown for hundreds of years now, ever since our country was formed.
Now, while I may not have kept close contact with a lot of the guys that I was stationed with, I do know that people that I've grown up with and people that I know, we have a tighter bond, knowing that we're both veterans. And I've also something I've learned with my involvement in the Johns Creek Veterans Association too is that a lot of times when you first leave the military, your focus is on the next phase of your life, whether that's getting a job and starting a family or going to school or whatever. And then when you're young, you're building your family, you're working on a career or a job set. And that's it takes up most of your focus and your efforts. But then as you get older, I guess I don't know if it's going down memory lane or reminiscing or trying to regain your youth or whatever, as that bond becomes even stronger. And Roger, I know you've had Roger Weiss on here before.
Oh yeah,
and
everybody knows Roger.
Yes, that is. I've been out with the man at restaurants and different venues, and it just never ceases to amaze me. The man cannot go anywhere without having people there that know him and know him very well. But when he does an introduction to our color guard, he has this little thing that he goes through: freedom isn't free. And one of the things he emphasizes in that is if you see a vet or someone in uniform or a first responder, that you go up and thank them for their service. And it's something I've done religiously, and I did it before I ever got involved with the JCVA. When I traveled in my professional career, I spent a lot of time in airports, and I was always, thanking vets there, especially when you see the traveling military in uniform. And offer to buy them a meal or a drink or just thank them for their service and stuff. It's something I take gratification from doing. Was it yesterday or the day before? I was in the convenience store, and there's this guy there. He was older in age, and he seemed to be struggling a little bit. And his wife was in trying to help him, and as they were leaving the store, he seemed to be a little discombobulated. And I saw he had on a Vietnam vet hat, and I just stopped and thanked him for his service. And at first, even though he was sort of taken back because his mind was someplace else, but then a note of recognition came across his face, and then he just sort of smiled. He says, "Well, thank you." And that's my uncle. When at one of the eulogies that they were talking about was he was in a restaurant, but there was this lady that gave this wonderful eulogy on my uncle, and her husband, my uncle and his wife, were in a restaurant, and all of a sudden my uncle gets up and says, "Excuse me, I'll be back in a minute." And he goes across the restaurant. He had seen a veteran sitting up there with a veteran hat on, and went over and didn't just thank him for his service, but he sat down and engaged him in conversation for a little bit and stuff. And it's just, I think vets really, they appreciate it, and they know how much other vets appreciate it. So I think they go out of their way to do it. But I think everybody should.
Well, from a veteran standpoint, and people that haven't served, if you do exactly what Keith says, just thank them for their service, and if you can, buy them a meal or whatever. But it'll do more for you than it does for the veteran himself or herself. And don't forget the women. They've played a major role in our military for many, many years now. And the nurses that served, just on and on. And I just, there's so many that we have to think. There's 2.1 million veterans in the United States now. And unfortunately, we're losing 1,000 World War II veterans daily. Not monthly, but daily. I think it's 1,020 or something like that, I believe the number is. And that brings me to something that Keith and I were talking about before the show, about people that have seen him and know him well, like his son or whoever it happens to be in your family. But if you're out there and you're a veteran and are married to a veteran or know a veteran in your family, or obviously you'd know them, but just have them get the grandkid, the grandchildren, whatever around them, and ask them to tell their story, because these stories, they're our foundation for the country in many ways. And passing on, just like you were talking, Keith, about your uncle that was in the Air Force, and they all have. In fact, I always have this deal, and Keith, you've had a couple of months to think about it. Do you know of one veteran that can tell only one story?
No, I don't think so.
It's an impossibility. So you get them to talking, and they can be humorous stories, they can be scary stories, literally, or they can, it's just, we've got to keep our history, and that history is stored in the person that served. And it doesn't matter which branch, whatever, they know stories, they have stories, and we have to keep our history as history, and that's stored in our veterans.
Well, my paternal grandfather, he was a farmer, and he had a large family, and he didn't serve in the military, but his brother did serve in the infantry in World War II, and he's buried in France from wounds sustained on D-Day. And that was very poignant in the family. And my grandfather, we were all raised, his kids were raised, and they raised us all with the knowledge that, this member of our family had made this ultimate sacrifice. And it fell down through the family. My dad served in the Navy during Korea. My oldest uncle, who I just saw at the funeral, my oldest surviving uncle, he was drafted into the Army. And then shortly after that, right after both of them got out of high school, my youngest two uncles both joined the Air Force. And so it just seemed sort of natural whenever I joined the Air Force, and then my brother, he was in the Army. So it's something that's, but a lot of the inspiration for doing it, or the sense of obligation to do it, was passed down through the family stories.
With our conversation today, I want to plead with everybody that's listening to go and vote. We have the finest country in the world, and we have to have it's because we have a thing called checks and balances. And what we were talking about a minute ago about the history being passed on by veterans, our history, unfortunately, in many of our textbooks are not passing on what a veteran can pass on, and we have to maintain this. And the only way we can do it, our founding fathers knew exactly what they were doing when they wrote the Constitution. It's one of the most remarkable documents in the world, and it's based on no one entity, no one out of the three, the executive branch, the legislative branch, or the judicial branch, can run the country by themselves. It has to be cooperative and legal, and we're in a situation here in Georgia that we have to get out and vote and make sure David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler maintain their seats in the Senate so we can have our checks and balances. So please, you've got a couple of days, and then that'll be it. And everybody, or I say everybody, many folks across the country and many veterans across the country are counting on Georgia to do the right thing. And we have to maintain our ability to check the White House and the judicial branch. So we can do that through the Senate. And I didn't mean to interrupt, but we've got to take a break right now. We'll be back with Keith right after a short break.
I'm your host, Dr. Hal. Every week we come to you with the information that you need so that you will be prepared to advocate for your family and for yourselves when it comes to your health care. God forbid we get Ossoff and Warnock in the Senate, and the left gets what they want, which is a majority in Congress and the White House. First of all, health care will be more expensive. There initially will be a public option. The government will run it. They will be initially very inexpensive, and it will drive commercial payers out of the healthcare market. then the choices will disappear. The only insurer out there will be the federal government, and that's when we get a single payer.
This is Rocky Blyer, and I hope you'll make plans to join us on January 28th for Warriors for Hope. I'm thrilled to be a part of this virtual fundraiser for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital and Warrior to Citizen. These organizations do so much to support veterans, first responders, and families who've been touched by pediatric cancer. I'd also like to thank David Moxley and his show, David's Pick, here on America's Web Radio for supporting Warriors for Hope. And I know you'll want to join in and support this event as well on January 28th. So visit warriorsforhope.events. That's Warriors and the number 4, Hope.events. You can make a gift and reserve your seat for this virtual benefit. Again, that's Warriors and the number 4, Hope.events. Thanks for your support, and I'll see you at noon on January 28th.
That's going to be quite an event that they're going to be putting on. So mark your calendar, January the 28th at noon, and be sure and tune in. And there are going to be some great, great items being auctioned off. So you'll enjoy it. It'll be fun, and you'll be surprised at who the other host is. A name that I think everybody in the country knows. His last name happens to be Greenwood, and you can figure out the rest of it from there. So, Keith, what do you think, veteran? Or let's get out to the healing wall in Johns Creek at Newtown Park.
Yeah. So, well. We've completed the installation. Actually, the city even opened it up to the public just before Memorial Day weekend. We still have not been allowed to have our official dedication of it, and because of COVID restrictions. But it'll be worth the wait because we're going to have quite the turnout and quite the event when we do finally dedicate it. But we're continuing on. We're working with Beautify Johns Creek and a couple other social groups that are working to beautify our park that's already very pretty. And because the eventual, where the wall is situated up on this bank, on that bank, eventually they're going to have 58,314 tulips. That's how many names are on the wall. And so that'll be quite the sight in the spring. We've gotten our lights.
Well, keep in mind, I'm not volunteering to count them.
No, sir. No. Well, actually, that number is going to change because there's going to be an addition to the park soon of a plaque, because I think the Vietnam War Memorial Foundation has added 75 names that were people that were, I think they were officially assigned to Vietnam, but then while there they went off on other missions, and so they were killed outside of Vietnam, so they weren't included in the original Vietnam War dead. But there is still going to get a special recognition, which is a tickly subject because there's family members and stuff and of those who died from Agent Orange from serving in country that feel like their name should be on the wall too, and I can't argue it against them. But then I have a friend who was in the Marine Corps. He's a tank commander in the Marine Corps. That he died several years after he came back. But there's no doubt in my mind that he was another Vietnam casualty. But we remember him in our hearts. But so we've done a lot to finish off the installation at the park. With the current effort right now is the addition of a kiosk for the wall, because there's software available to us from the Vietnam War Memorial Foundation in D.C. that we'll have installed on the kiosk that allowed visitors that comes that's looking for a specific name on the wall, that they can enter it into this database on the kiosk, and it'll tell them which panel, which line, where it's positioned in the line to help them and find the name. And then additional, will have the capacity or the capability for people to make donations to the kiosk, which we will then use to fund other veteran-centric programs that are being run by other groups, organizations in the country, in the Southeast, in Georgia, in North Metro Atlanta area, that we want to assist. Whether it's veteran homelessness or PTSD or job training or any of the numerous different efforts like Warriors to Citizens and other similar groups that are very involved. One of the things I wanted to get to today, we won't have time, will give me another excuse to come back again, was I do a lot of volunteer work with the Habitat for Humanity. Well, Habitat for Humanity has a foundation that they work in conjunction with a foundation by Home Depot and other ones that they have programs set up not just to build houses, but for vets in existing homes that are in need of repair. So these are very worthwhile efforts that many different groups are involved in, focus on towards our veterans. My biggest concern with that is there's so many divergent activities, but there's not. My frustration is we don't have a central clearinghouse for everything. So that because I think that there's a lot of effort and monies being spent in a duplication of effort, like administratively and stuff like that. That there should be a better organizational structure for these different groups to know what each other is doing, so that they can. If somebody's doing something, why should you do it when you could do it together or help each other or somewhere like that to
a clearinghouse.
Yeah, pretty much. And it's an effort, but then everybody's got their little place in the sandbox, and so it gets into stuff like that. But right now, though, getting back to the wall, we are continuing to do things to prepare for the official dedication. Right now, we're going to shoot for Vietnam War Memorial Day in March of this year of 2021, but who knows where we'll be with COVID at that time. Another thing that we have going on, and I think it's set up for, and Submarine Mike is going to get on me for this one for not having. I forgot to bring that piece of paper with it, but there's back in, I think it was World War I, that they after the war was over, that this is where they first set up the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. And then there's a garden there, and I believe it's tulips that. Anyway, so there's an effort underway to create gardens in recognition of the 100th, I believe it's the 100th anniversary of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. And so we've set aside a section of our park that we're going to be dedicating and planting flowers in it. And some of the flowers are coming from the original flowers of the original park in back in 100 years ago. And so that's one of the other things. But again, that'll be something later in 2021. November, I guess, around Veterans Day in November, I believe.
I've almost an hour now. I've been sitting across from your T-shirt, and I keep having the thought, I know what DD 214 means. That's your discharge and your honorable discharge and the paperwork that says you served. And you were honorably discharged on this date and at the rank of and so forth and so on. I have a DD 256, I believe it is, coming out of the reserves. It's the same as a 214, but it's a reserve deal. But I was just sitting here wondering how many folks would have a clue what. I ain't perfect, but I do have a DD 214.
That's close enough. For an old man, that's close enough. I've never had anybody come up and ask me what it is. I've had plenty of people that know what it is acknowledge it, but I doesn't feel bad for sitting there for an hour, because one of our monthly JCVA meetings, I wore it there, and I think it was after our meeting was over before anyone noticed it and said anything about it. It was pretty funny. But anyway, I like wearing it. So. Oh
yeah, well, I quite frankly for years and years and years was not that proud that I had served in the Guard, and then when I got out I was in the Army Reserve. But thankfully folks like Rick White and Mike and many others have straightened my head out. When we have only 1% of our nation that will raise their hand to serve their country, there's something wrong. And then we have 1 out of 4 veterans that are homeless on the street, and that's a crime. That's a shame. That's terrible. Both situations are terrible, And, if you don't like our country, then get the hell out.
Colonel White, I agree with you about Colonel White's enlightenment on the subject, because he had a story about where he served 2 tours in Vietnam and was scheduled to go back for a third, and then the war was shut down. And years later, he ran into a friend of his who had gone to, I guess he had gone through OCS with, who had spent the whole time in Vietnam in Europe. And this guy was lamenting his service, thinking that he had somehow had a less honorable service because he did not go to war, and Rick did, and so he felt guilty about it. And Rick said, I told him, he said, when you raise your hand and you take that oath, after that, what happens to your career? It's up to the military decides where you go and what you do. And I know in looking at my service, and I was in from April 74 to March of 79, it was winding down in Vietnam. The military was very much looked upon. Now, I didn't have any of the, even though I spent 13 and a half months in California, I didn't have any of the negative experiences some of my veteran friends had coming through San Francisco on their way home from Vietnam. But it wasn't, you had Nixon resigned on my birthday while I was at school. We went and celebrated my birthday down at Big Sur, and a bunch of hippies came into the campground next to us and had a resignation party for Nixon, and I thought it was pretty funny. But but then that was followed with Ford, and then Jimmy Carter, and the military was an afterthought then, and it wasn't. I see my service different as during the time that I served than guys who've been in during any of the conflicts afterwards, or especially any of them that have been in the last 20 years, because there was a whole different world. But again, like Rick says, when you raise your hand and you take that oath, you took the oath, and it's up for them to decide how they want to use you. So it's helped me put it in a little bit different perspective.
Well, and obviously with the reserve today, and you don't know how many people know it or don't know it, but Desert Shield and Desert Storm,
they're doing the load. They're doing the major load of the work now.
Right. The Army Reserve, and we call it the National Guard, but it's the state National Guard, and then the federal can call up any part thereof that they want. But they still have to go through the governor of the state.
There are people in the sandbox right now that are on something like their 12th, 13th, 14th tour.
Yeah, I know.
Of duty. And that just, you can't, and the environment over there with the IEDs and all of that, it's just amazing how they do it and still stay sane.
Well, it's no, I just had something pop up that, but it's, again, folks, if you don't have a family member or don't know of someone that served and you haven't served, then make it your duty to find out about what veterans, what you can do for veterans and what our veterans, The interesting thing, too, depending on how things go, well, one thing that I'll bring up, I have never interviewed a veteran in here, and I think I told you this when you were here the first time. I have never interviewed a veteran that if I said, if our president called, would you go back in? And, they'll push your walkers back in to get back and fight for our country if needed.
Last year, pre-COVID, on Veterans Day, our JCVA Color Guard, we did something like 17 events over 4 days related to Veterans Day. This year, I supplied materials for one. I participated in another virtually, and on Veterans Day, we had only 2 events, and both of them were at retirement homes. And the project.
Keith, I got to interrupt you.
Okay.
We're totally out of time. We'll have you back, and we'll finish that story and have many more when you come back. Thanks for being with us, and You've been listening to David's Pick on America's Web Radio.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.